Each time an employee is hired, one of the forms they should complete as part of onboarding is the W-4 form. This form is one that the employee completes on their own, and then the employer puts this information into the payroll system, and that will determine how the employee's federal income tax withholdings are calculated. Now, a lot of times employees have questions about how they should complete the W-4, and I always suggest to employers to not help. Now, I know that sounds awful, but with the W-4, this is strictly calculating the federal income tax on their payroll check, but it does not take into account the employee's full financial situation, which can include all sorts of things, including a spouse's income, their children or dependents, home mortgages. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So you as the employer really don't want to be caught in the middle telling the employee how to complete the form, because if they end up owing tax, they're going to come back to you and say, why did you tell me to do the form this way? I owe all this money. Now, one thing that people often don't realize is that the federal W-4 was updated in 2020, and the intent of the update was so that employees do not receive a refund. So what this means is that if you complete this form accurately, you should expect to receive nothing back from the government when you file your taxes. Now, some people would argue that that is a positive because then you're not giving the federal government a free loan. But a lot of times people rely on that annual return for different things, to pay off bills or go on vacation. So one thing to keep in mind when filling out the W-4 is that you don't necessarily have to complete the form true to your situation. Now, what I mean by that is if you are married, for example, you do not have to claim married on your W-4. If you claim single instead, more tax will be withheld. The same is true for the number of dependents that you claim. For example, if you have 2 children on the form, you can mark 2 and take a $4,000 dependent credit. But if you prefer to get a $4,000 refund, you can claim 0 children, and then you will not be taking that $4,000 credit throughout the year. Now, as the employer, when you get a W-4 from your employee, there's a couple things to watch out for. So once the W-4 has been completed, the form will be invalid if additional alterations, additions, or deletions are made on the form. The form is also considered invalid if it is not signed and dated by the employee. And thirdly, the one that comes up most often, a W-4 is actually invalid if an employee is trying to claim a flat amount or percent of federal income tax to be withheld on the form. Some payroll systems do have the option for a flat percent or amount for federal income tax, but this is not an option on the actual W-4 form. So if an employee asks you to withhold $100 per paycheck total, this is an invalid W-4 form because there's no spot on that form to ask for that to be done. Same is true of a percent. So the employee does have to complete the form, but it's not up to you to determine if it was completed accurately or not. The employer is only responsible for entering the information as the employee has provided it into the payroll system. Now, if an employee marks exempt on their W-4 form, this means that no federal income tax will be withheld. This does not make the wages exempt from federal income tax, though. So the employee will still have wages in box 1 of their W-2, which is wages subject to federal income tax, but then they will have $0 withheld on their W-2. So sometimes people think if they mark exempt, they are telling the government that their wages are exempt from federal income tax, and that's not the case. This is just going to make you exempt from having any federal income tax withheld on the paycheck, But again, you will still have those wages reported as federally taxable wages. Now, employees can change their W-4 throughout the year. Employees usually have 30 days to make those changes once they receive them in the payroll system. So if an employee, for example, every time they get a bonus, they hand you a new W-4 to change their federal withholding, you don't necessarily have to comply and hurry up and get that into the system to change that as they have bonuses or whatever the case may be. Each year, employers should ask employees if they want to complete a new W-4 form, but employees are not required to complete a new W-4 form each year. And if you're an employer that's been around for a while and you still have 2019 forms or previous year forms on file, it may be a good idea to ask the employee to complete a new W-4 form using the new form status. So at the end of the day, again, the W-4 form is what the employee fills out that the employer puts into the payroll system that dictates how much federal income tax is withheld. If you complete the W-4 accurately, expect to have no tax return, no credit back from the IRS when you file your income taxes, but you can adjust the form so that you have more tax withheld and then you can get a return. Again, you can change. If you're married, you can claim single instead, which will have more tax withheld. If you have children or dependents, you can reduce the number of children or dependents you're claiming on the W-4 form so that those credits come back to you at tax time rather than throughout the year. And then there's also a space on the W-4 form to have an additional amount withheld each pay period. So that is another way, if you are someone that wants to have an income tax return, it's another way that you can go ahead and have more tax withheld throughout the year. As the employer, make sure you are collecting this form when the employee is hired. But once you have that form on file, you can continue using that same form until or unless the employee gives you an updated form. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to help, or you can find us online at valorpayrollsolutions.com.